Back to the Hoosier Garage. We're working on this floor pan on a Saturday. And if you notice, this cross member has like a matte black finish on it. Went ahead and cleaned this up because that floor is going to go all over it, and painted that. And what that paint is, many people are familiar with POR or POR 15. I like to use Eastwood Rust Encapsulator. I don't know if POR 15 or POR 15, as some like to call it, whatever it is, has changed their formula. I used to use it, but you always had to use a tie coat primer, which is something to enable it to adhere the top coat, like if you was to paint this green again over top of it. And it's very kind of a hard finish. Well, this does the same thing, but you can paint over it. It's not as thick and likely to chip and all that stuff. That's just mainly my opinion. I've been using this for probably 15 years now, and I really like it. It seems to hold up the steel very well. So I showed you the pan that went in there yesterday and how we got to put a little strip in. We're kind of rebuilding that structurally. Now over here, here's the actual floor pan that's going to go in. Here's the drill, and all these little X's are signifying the spot welds that we're going to put in. Now the spot welds, just as the factory would have done it, kind of like these here. You got one here. This is a piece I put in, and you'll see them. Here's old ones here that are almost 50 years old. You know, this is, very common. This is how unibodies and even a lot of non-unibody cars are put together, at least the shell of the car. So I mapped it out across here. I laid the panel down. I looked underneath it. I lined up. You can use a straight edge on this part. Same thing here, except for these little cutouts for the engine cover rail. And we're just putting them every couple of inches, about like the factory would do. And so they should be about this size, about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch roughly. And just do all these where I put X's, and this will be the lap flange right here. This will be the part that goes on the body or the sheet metal here. And so we'll get all these punched out and even do the ones here on the end. We'll drill those out, and of course those will be on that far side over there. I'll have to probably get underneath the van and clamp them real tight, get them nice sandwich together, and then weld them. So we'll do that, and we'll have to trim some of this up to fit on this side, but I'll show you here in a bit when we get there. I'm typically one of these people that I'll have drill bits and then they'll go dull, and I don't have a way to sharpen them, so I have other drill bits and they go dull. And I really like these little step bits, but the end of it is kind of dull. But the rest of it cuts really, once you get it a hole, it cuts really well. So I'm a little cheap on that, or I just don't think to get it. So I'm using a really good bit here. It's small, about an 1/8 inch bit. And once you pop these, they only take a few seconds to get them through. Then you can go through with that one and it'll just rip them right out. So we'll get this punched out, get it laid in there, and see what we got. Also have to make sure to remember to make the places for our bucket seat holes. Those will be a bigger hole, so I'll use that step drill as well, just make a larger hole so that it accommodates, much like this. See how the sheet metal hole is bigger than the nut that's welded in behind it. So keep that in mind if you're doing something like that. So all right, we'll have an update here in a bit. So we've got the holes drilled for the spot welds all the way through there, and I went ahead and opened up, start from this side, the holes for the bucket seats. And these are the bolts that held the seat, basically those bases down. So here's the ones that were untouched, and then in the cross member here, you can't see it from there, but it has the threaded holes. So I basically marked them from underneath because it's all the way through a hole. So I held it down where we wanted. We had our line marked up here, and then we marked it from underneath, and so these holes are a little bigger, as you can see, as I showed you a minute ago, in the sheet metal. So when they laid it down at the factory, it fell right on top where they needed to go. I was just a hair off for some reason, but the bolt will attach, and then this will all weld down here, not here, but it'll weld down everything else. So we'll go ahead and screw the bolt in there to keep it from moving where you don't want it to, and that'll all get pushed down, but this is a good anchor bit. Now, all 4 of those holes had a place to go. The situation on this side was you had these holes, which are just like those over there. So we will use those. We'll get our bolts and tie that down if we have to. And then the other one was in this piece right here, which was untouched. So there's that hole, right? This one is a floating situation where it's not in the cross member, because this seat literally sets back further. And the reason it is on these vans, because you have a narrower foot rest area here than you do on that side. See, it's wider. I come over here, it's a lot narrower. So that gives the passenger a little bit more room to have their feet. So they push this seat back further. So you could tell how far these holes are here off this new pan and how far they are off here. They're back like 6 inches probably. And so that keeps these from falling in the crossmember. Plus they brought it a little closer to the door so that you can have more room to swing your feet out to get to the back. That's just how this thing was engineered. So you have to keep that in mind, not to make everything symmetrical side to side, because that isn't the case here. So we measured our hole from here to here, and I think I had about 9 inches on the dot. So I knew on this one 9 inches, and then you measure across from here to here, whatever that was, 6.5, 7, I don't know. And then it comes, so then you basically intersect them together, and then measure across from here to here and make sure it's contingent with that. It was, and then you confirm it by laying your base, seat base, right back down over it, lining these holes up more first of all. So we got them centered, and we got this one centered. Check those again. We're good. See, we're right on top of it. So then our hole here is where we will need to weld a nut to hold that specific thread underneath there. So it's pretty close there. So we'll get that nut underneath there. I need to find one. I probably got one in the back in the old parts bins that I can weld on the back side. They usually use square nuts on these, I noticed, but this is going to be hidden. You're not going to see it. As long as that thread is bolted up in there, or welded up in there, I should say, and it accepts it, you're never going to see it because it's going to be inside the frame rail. So just stay tuned. Okay, so we found one nut in the whole shop that fit that fine thread seat bolt. So I went ahead, I welded it on the back side of this. That's what's holding it in there now. Now we're going to start figuring out how to make this thing fit the way it's supposed to. Everything's pretty good as far as it just needs to be pushed down and held to the cross member while you spot weld it. But one spot, this is pretty good. Although there's a big of a gap, but I did move it. I do have a little bit of movement here, which is okay. As long as this all plays within its boundaries, that's fine. But I moved it that way just a little bit. I think it'll be okay here to weld it back to the piece that's angled and kind of recreate that. And you have the same thing underneath here. This piece just juts out a little further. So right here, the part that's a little rusty, that's the piece that's lapped underneath this one. So all the way down through there, it needs to be straightened out. I could either cut this side or one or the other. It doesn't really matter. This will need to be addressed here. It kind of just drives at an angle there, so that will have to be cut. I think what I'll do, since this is fresher steel, I'll just conform to it. So it's got a little bit of an uneven cut. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my cutting wheel. A lot of people probably wouldn't do this, but I've done it before and it seems to work. So I'm not going to do it at this moment on the camera because I only got one hand, but I'll just ride that track right between this and cut it all the way up to this little bend right here, the 90 degree. And then I'll trim this little corner out and then see what we got. So I just went ahead and made the cut, and you can see this butts up pretty close to it now. I rode the printed side of the wheel, and when I say printed side, see that yellow there on this DeWalt disc, it tends to not have as much cutting power because I guess all that print or paint on it or whatever. So I kind of let it ride against this so it doesn't grind it away, and I let it just follow right against it and cut this piece here. So now you have a really nice seam done there, and when I bring it back a little bit more like that, it sits pretty snug against it. The only thing I have to do, I don't want this level with this. This needs to set just a little lower so that it's more on par with that plateau underneath it, and then it'll look right. It'll probably, since it's so close to this seam, my weld will kind of interfere onto this, but I mean, you can only do so much from this vantage point. But we should be pretty good there, and then it needs to be kind of kicked around a little bit. Yeah, right there. Yeah, this corner was kind of where I had it pivoting off of. And see, that looks like it's a little wider than it was, but it might need a little bit of budging this way with this thing sitting on it. It's kind of awkward, but I've dealt with bigger gaps than that. It's not great, but that's just how there was a little bit of rust here and it blew out, but it was solid right next to that. It's kind of rare, but so, and over there, take a look at that. It might need work. Yeah. So that'll go down. You have to force it down and then merge it with this piece and this. This is technically one piece originally, but we're gonna try to recreate that, and then we'll put our piece back in here later. But the ideal thing to do is to get it all tacked. So you'll tack things like this that are supposed to go together as if they was one piece originally, but make sure when you go to tack it, spot weld it to this cross member, that it's down solid. You want it, see how you see that shadow right there? You want that thing to go further than that, so I'll have to put some real weight on it to get that down. And usually you find the most cooperative one. That's a pretty good one. That light's at a pretty good angle. That's pretty flush there. And then just kind of work around, and then you'll get it down. And then it's kind of wild if you're not used to metal, how flimsy all that seems. You think, well, that can't hold together. But once you start getting everything welded down, it becomes really solid really quick, and it's just like everything else that's been in here. A lot like that. So, all right, stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to cover a few other things. Here's the panel that goes in there. It's upside down. I took one of these scouring pads and some vinegar, which I put in a little squirt bottle. And basically, you see it has a kind of a sheen to it. I went through and scrubbed it really good with the vinegar and that pad, and that helps etch the steel as well as clean it. So because this is going to go face down, so these areas inside between my fingers here is going to be on top of the cross member, and it's not going to have any paint on it. All right, so we want to try to make that as clean as possible. Yeah, you're going to get a little bit of welding, that dust, that white dust, the powder from the flux, it'll leave spots in here, but we can get it as clean as possible and able to accept a finish as possible, so that when we go through with our internal coating, we can run that hose up in there, and we can cover this through the holes in the cross member that I talked about in one of the previous videos. And if you're not sure what those holes are, it's stuff like this. These are very helpful. Any of these little gaps where you can stick that nozzle that's about 2 or 3 feet long and spray it 360 degrees, and it'll cover everything. It'll cover this again, and it'll cover the panel sitting on top of it. Right. Another thing that I went ahead and did. You see how this frame rail goes down, and we're going to be covering this up. So this van had dirt daubers everywhere, and I've knocked a lot of them off, and I noticed they had really built, and you can't see it, but inside that frame rail, and most of it was about right here. So I took the shop vac, cleaned it out, and ran it through both frame rails. And it was heavy, everybody. I even had to take the stick and go all the way up in there. And then I went through and blew it out. Well, there is a lot of... That is completely dirt dauber nest. So we got that cleaned up, because you don't want all that, holding moisture and turning into mud and creating rust. So there is a surface rust in there. There's some of the dirt daubers. So I blew it out the best I could. I can't get my arm up in there to scour or anything, but it looks like there's no oil or anything. So I will take some of the internal frame coating and spray it up in there. And I'll show you how that works since we're here anyway. So. So you got a hose, right, that goes with this nozzle. It's pretty standard nozzle. But you can take this off and take this and press it on there. And then you have this long, it's like a 360 degree coverage. It's got little holes on the top and on the sides. Run that up in the frame rail. Of course it falls off. That's what it's going to do. A little bit there, and I can look for a hole on the side here. I think there's one right there. I need to feel. Sometimes it'll fool you. Yeah, so there's a hole there, and you could even do this one later. It's not going to affect too much, but it'll go in there like that. And I went through the other side, so there's a hole on the other side there too. I only got so many hands, Hear that? I was shooting it everywhere in there. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. So you see this stuff, it's kind of green. That's what the green stuff is you've been seeing on the inside of these frame rails. So we'll get to that. And like I showed you, prep the metal for that sort of a thing later. And you can even use the black spray that's like, this is the Eastwood stuff. You can put that nozzle on one of the regular cans and spray it up in there if you want. This stuff's just really good. It's looser and it gets into the little crevices. So either way. So that's where we're at. We'll give you an update here in a bit. We'll start tacking this thing down and we'll get with you again. Okay, we got this ready here. We'll go ahead and use the frame rail coating on this, the green here, and just took some acrylic enamel black and sprayed the rest of it so it won't flash rust or anything by chance. bolts in just to kind of give it a pilot. Pretty good. Sometimes you can leave enough of it flapping if you think, like down at that end, it might need trimmed. You can tack it in here, and if it starts to change it there, you can buzz a little off. Alright, let's see what we got. Go with that, I think. You can see when I started from this side on the spot weld, and I'm just coming this way, just feeding it over because it's going to move the metal a little bit. Got a couple spots here that are lower. The original floor pan had a drop in it, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. You just have to push it down and get that shape back that way. But you just got to work it one side to the other while these spot welds. If you put one here, you put one there, it might start warping really bad. It'll bubble up and won't go down. So. So we're all welded in now, for the most part. All the spot welds that we need here. This area here and the equal area on that side needs to be pushed down. If you look at a factory one, it's kind of a square shape and it's shoved down towards the frame rail and then it's tacked there, so we'll deal with that. This is all stitched together. This is all stitched together. On that side, we have to get the pinch weld here from underneath, so that's just setting. But we got this all welded up all the way to here. All these spot welds. It all sounds about the same there. So, you know, our seat holes, they all line up, they're good. Got to fab this piece in and do the railing. And these marks right here are for the continuation of these. I might be able to see if I can roll them somehow. And there's this one and that one. You ignore that one. And then push this down like on that side. So we're getting there.